Causes of the American Revolution by Sean McDonough. The French and Indian War was a war that took place between 1689 and 1748. It was actually a war between the French and British over land and money. The war started to turn in Britain's favor as the population grew to 1,500,000 Britons to 70,000 French. The British eventually won the war. However, this caused many problems for Britain because it put them in debt after the French left all the land they owned to Britain, so it would cost more for them. The British expect the colonists to pay back the debt. The attacks on British forts in the Great Lakes region and Ohio River Valley were caused by colonists taking over native lands in western Pennsylvania and Virginia. Pontiac's rebellion were named after an Ottawa chief who led the attack on Detroit. Eventually, the attacks became expensive for Britain, so they decided to keep peace with the natives. This leads to the natives and the British restraining settlers west of the Appalachians. The Proclamation of 1763 ordered colonial settlers to remain east of the Appalachians. Colonists ignored this, and this action alerted the British government to take more direct control of their American colonies. The rebellion would officially end due to natives' low supply on gunpowder. Britain needed to raise money, so George Grenville, a Prime Minister of Great Britain, proposed the Sugar Act, and that was raising money by collecting duties already in effect. This required custom officers and created courts to collect the duties and persecute smugglers. Then in March 1765, he also proposed a bill known as the Stamp Act to collect money from the colonies. This required all colonists to pay a tax on almost all printed materials, including newspapers, books, court documents, contracts, and land deeds. These both angered the colonists, so they decided to protest. Even though Britain was protecting them, the colonists still wanted a war. The Sons and Daughters of Liberty was an organization that opposed British laws. They were also called Patriots. Patriots showed powerful new interest in politics. Powerful actions taken by the Patriots were damaging houses of tax collectors. The Daughters of Liberty supported non-importation of British goods during the American Revolution. A famous leader of this group was Boston's Sam Adams. They also refused to drink British tea and made their own clothes. Tax collectors became scared and asked the Parliament for protection. Taking jobs would eventually lead to the Boston Massacre. Just as the Redcoats are not paid very well, they went to the dock and competed against colonists for jobs. Business owners gave the jobs to the British to avoid conflict. The British also seized liberty because of John Hancock's smuggling. The angry colonists protest and throw snowballs at British soldiers' houses, and they get shot eventually. Then Paul Revere paints an untrue picture that riles up the colonists. Eventually, the British took away all taxes but the tea tax to show that they still had power. This would eventually lead to the Boston Tea Party. The tea boycott worsened financial problems for the already struggling British East India Company. Parliament passed a law that allowed the company to sell directly to the colonists to help the company. Tea is now cheaper, even with the tax. This created a monopoly for the British because they cut their prices. So in response, angry colonists dressed up as Indians and boarded 3 ships and then achieved to dump the tea into the harbor. The Intolerable Acts was a punishment for the Boston Tea Party. First, the British shut down Boston Harbor until the colonists could pay back the debt. To Americans, these acts were known as coercive acts, which Parliament passed in 1774 to control the colonies. Then the British canceled all town meetings because they thought it would stop the colonists' actions if they stopped their leaders. A group of delegates that met in 1774 and represented all the American colonies except Georgia planned to boycott all British goods, and they were known as the First Continental Congress. In defiance of the ban of town meetings, delegates from Suffolk County, Massachusetts, met at private homes in Dedham on September 6, 1774, and in Milton on September 9th to plan resistance against the coercive acts. The convention recommended measures such as calling a provincial congress, withholding public funds from the treasury, non-intercourse with Britain, Ireland, and the West Indies, and raising a defensive militia. On April 19th, 1775, General Thomas Gage sent troops to arrest Hancock and Adams to seize Patriots' weaponry, which provoked the Battle of Lexington and Concord. Then 70 Patriots gathered on Lexington Green. British soldiers were told to disperse. Then, finally after the shooting, 8 Patriots were killed. The British began toward Boston, but Minutemen started firing at the British. This event injured 200 British soldiers, but the British reached Boston in the late afternoon. Thomas Gage was made governor of Massachusetts to enforce the coercive acts. On May 1775 in Philadelphia, a Second Continental Congress comes together and starts acting as America's first government. They take responsibility for the war. The new Continental Army is given to George Washington. Colonists still want to remain in the British Empire, but without having to pay taxes. In July 1775, after 3 months of bloodshed, Congress sent an olive branch petition to King George III. He rejects this and sends more troops to Boston. The Declaration of Independence, which most delegates signed on August 2nd, was written by Thomas Jefferson and proposed by Richard Henry Lee of Virginia. The 4 parts of the document are the preamble, which explains the purpose of the document. Then, the Declaration of Natural Rights, which states that rights come from God and the government protects the rights. These were the ideas of John Locke. Next is the Bill of Indictment. And this explains how Britain violated natural rights and why he used statements that would refer to King George III. Finally, the Declaration of Independent States. Britain violated rights. United States are free to break away.